If you are a busy, ambitious language learner who is learning solo, but feeling that you just can't stay consistent because your routine is falling apart every time life gets in the way, I assure you, you are not alone. And I want to walk you through in this video how to make a routine that actually survives all of your busy language seasons and life seasons, but also helps you make lasting and meaningful progress along the way. We have all fallen into the exhausting cycle of having to restart and redo and just totally scrap any of the routines that we have really dedicated a lot of time and thought into organizing. And the thing is, we usually keep our sort of ideal weeks and ideal routines of how we expect things in our lives and our language learning to go in mind when we're constructing those routines. But actually what's happening is that when life naturally does get in the way, as it does for all of us, we feel like we failed when our routine does not automatically adapt to real life because we've only set it up for how we ideally are imagining things to go throughout the week. Because again, we're designing our routine for our ideal weeks instead of what is reality. I get that this is really exhausting, and I want to help you break that cycle so that you can actually devote the limited and very valuable time and energy that you have to what matters in getting closer to fluency in your language. So with the Mindful Fluency Method that I developed for helping language learners master their languages, but on their own terms, we talk a lot about the 3 U's principles of language learning that this method is based off of. And this is my personal philosophy for how I approach languages in my own life, but also how I help language learners through theirs. Make language learning useful, sustainable, and also enjoyable at the same time. Because yes, it is actually possible. In order to help language learners apply these principles to their routines, we always talk about high, medium, and low energy. And what that looks like is basically with high energy, you feel like you can do the activities that take the most cognitive demand from you, that take the most energy, that take the most concentration, however you would like to define what your high energy is in your language life. You probably can already identify some of the activities that you have done in your language learning before that fall into this category. Then we have medium energy, and those tasks are usually associated with just the normal energy that we might have on a day-to-day basis. So you can still be busy, but you're generally pretty steady across how consistent you are and defining what consistency actually means to you throughout the week with whatever you're trying to improve in your language learning skills. You can also keep your core habits pretty alive during this period. So either through shorter sessions or including some more review sessions instead of always learning something new, etc. And then when we're low energy, that is usually when outside life is pretty chaotic for us, or we just know that we need to take a step back from language learning, maybe for mental health, maybe because we have been devoting so much time and mental space to facing a certain emotional barrier in our learning that we feel we just can't overcome, such as perfectionism or imposter syndrome, or simply just the guilt of feeling not productive enough, which I know is a real issue for language learners. So even with low energy tasks, you can think about whatever you can include, even about like 5 minutes that really take a lot less effort than your high and medium energy tasks for the week. What I would do now in terms of after having figured out what activities fall under high, low, and medium energy, you can now divide those activities further into the core skills. So speaking, writing, reading, listening, what would you use them for to improve? And then under those categories too, you can consider how would you like to adapt each activity under those skills to high, low, medium energy too. And then under those activities, you can design a version for each energy level. For example, for speaking, let's say you like to do live lessons. So usually maybe you think that it's a high energy activity, but now you can break it down into how would I be able to adapt this to my different energy levels if I'm not high energy for one day? For example, you can, on high energy days, still do your 1-hour lesson on your chosen platform. For medium energy, you could instead just do a 10-minute recording of yourself just chatting and practicing solo speaking. And then for low energy, you can just send a voice note to a tandem partner. But here, the key takeaway is to actually create more of what I like to call an a la carte menu of your language learning activities, because it really helps you get rid of decision fatigue, which is a really good one, right? We spend so much time trying to decide, quote unquote, what's the best thing to do in our language learning. And sometimes, especially on a low energy day, we can come back and we just get overwhelmed and using most of the time that we dedicated to studying to trying to decide what to do and second guessing ourselves and so on. So you can easily pick from an a la carte menu instead what you would like to do. And because you've already pre-screened and reflected on these activities in advance, you know that every single minute of your study session gets to count whenever you want to. And it also just makes starting easier, because sometimes when I come down from a really hard day at work, for example, it's harder to just get going. But sometimes we just need to start and then we get into the flow, and then it's easier to complete whatever task we want to improve for that day, even on a low energy day. So I suggest that you highly try this out. I also really love coaching high achievers who have really ambitious goals, because I know exactly how it feels to want to do everything right. Like, there's such an innate desire to want to do well, but when we pair usually our perfectionism with high expectations, then that can lead us to treating ourselves so rigidly, in a sense, as language learners, and treating our routine as just a means to an end, instead of something that really deserves our nurturing, our enjoyment. But I understand as well that understanding how to access that enjoyment can take some practice, especially if we have been really used to measuring our progress and looking at metrics as the only valid way to interact with our language, or even give us permission to feel proud of ourselves. When you stop trying to resist who you are and start planning around your very real life circumstances, your very real energy and time limits, then again, that's how language learning starts to feel more aligned and more enjoyable for us in both the short term and the long term. Make sure you do grab a free copy of my Language Learning Sustainability Planner. I made it just for you, so you can start to build more of this rhythm, more of this high, low, medium energy into your routine by being able to track it in real time for this upcoming week, and also have some really good reflection questions that will deepen your connection to yourself, as well as to how you are processing learning a language while you're on your own journey. And again, the key here is really understanding that sustainable learning that keeps you consistent on your own terms is really what gets you to fluency, but in a way more enjoyable and therefore way more effective way than you've ever thought was possible for you. And I also love working as a language coach to other language learners who really want to master languages and get fluent their way on their own terms, but are feeling really frustrated and stuck. So if you are interested in learning more about how we could be a good fit for one another, I invite you to book my free discovery call. Absolutely no pressure. It's really just to see if we are going to be a good fit to work together. Thanks you guys for joining me for this video once more, and I hope to see you in another video soon.